An obsessive genius pulls off hundreds of perfect crimes.
He very quickly learns the technique for becoming an invisible man.
No security can stop him.
Regardless of what they did to defend themselves, he was bound and determined to do it, and he did.
He prepares himself as though he were going into battle.
This is a guy who has infinite patience and dexterity that's nothing short of phenomenal. People refer to him as Spider-Man. He was the single most proficient thief I ever saw in my life.
Find out how he did it next on Masterminds. In 1985, librarians at Washington State University Library realized millions in rare books had mysteriously disappeared.
One of the archive workers was in the stacks and noticed a gap and came to the conclusion that there's a heck of a lot of books missing out of this collection. She first made sure that they weren't misshelved, that they weren't misplaced, that they weren't checked out. She finally said, okay, we have been hit here.
Investigators immediately locked down the library and searched for evidence.
I spent a lot of time looking for forced entry, the things that traditional burglars use, and didn't see anything.
The most likely suspect, of course, is the person who's used a book. Who uses the book? Students and faculty and visitors. So the suspects are anyone who has walked through the door.
I started very discreetly to find out if anybody in the library had a questionable background or was having problems that would require them to do something this desperate.
As Washington State University police continued to investigate, they discovered the burglary wasn't an isolated incident.
Right.
I heard, well, a similar event happened in Oregon, and the same thing happened down in Claremont. I said, so we've got somebody working up and down the coast.
Joining forces, authorities pieced together the similarities between the thefts.
There were certain types of books that he pinpointed, and that's what he went after.
He targeted the great repositories of Americana, stealing rare and valuable books.
There was never evidence of break-in or forced entry or anything of that nature.
You've got somebody who can get in there, take out 100 rarities, and would simply disappear.
I was spinning my wheels, kind of trying to generate something that would get me pointed in the right direction, and it was mostly in frustration because I just didn't have any leads.
Unable to find the thief, police tried to track down the stolen books.
I was betting that these things were going to be on the market somewhere sometime. Because why steal something unless you're going to make some kind of money out of it?
These books did not resurface. They might as well have dropped off the edge of the planet.
So the flyer was put together to warn other libraries that there's something going on. And also, if this happened to you, can you give us any information about who did it?
But even with the libraries on high alert, the book bandit couldn't be stopped. Then, in 1988, the multi-million-dollar Cotton Mather collection, a series of manuscripts about the Salem witch trials, was stolen from the Connecticut State University Library.
These were taken from here, as you can see. They left all of these books. They just went frozen.
It's secured by extensive alarm systems. It is difficult to get close to that collection without having someone be alerted. But no one ever saw him. He was, kind of a phantom.
We determined 45 states, several Canadian provinces, and the District of Columbia, more than 23,000 books stolen.
The FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office were throwing around numbers like $50 million.
If you dug a trench 50 feet deep in the ground and you put these books in and encased them in concrete, he would have found a way to get to them. You had a master criminal here.
The mystery bandit police couldn't stop wasn't in it for the money. Driven by an obsession, Stephen Blumberg used an array of ingenious techniques to become the greatest book thief the world had ever known. The question is, how did he do it? Stephen Blumberg was born into a rich family in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
The Blumberg family wealth comes primarily from real estate. Suffice to say that no one in that family is ever going to need to collect food stamps.
From an early age, Blumberg was different from other kids.
He's a bright guy who had tremendous potential, but he was obsessed with the past.
And the things he was most fascinated by were antique books.
There is a thrill that comes with knowing that you're holding in your hands a book that's lasted for half a millennium. All he did was to dedicate himself to knowledge that had to do with books. That's all he did. He didn't have a hobby. This is his life.
I'm absolutely beside myself.
Blumberg's obsession alienates him from his family.
When you're dealing with a mind as powerful as Stephen's, giving him a lecture or shaking your finger at him is shouting down a well. There's simply no point in it. You might as well save your breath.
His passion for books soon gets the better of him. He's caught stealing from a derelict house and is sent to the Anoka Juvenile Detention Center.
Most juvenile facilities for adolescent males are referred to as gladiator academies. These facilities are colleges for crime. If you want to learn how to drive a car, you go to somebody who knows how to drive a car. If you want to learn how to steal, you go where the crooks are.
At 18, Blumberg is released, just as his family trust fund starts paying him $80,000 a year.
He had all the time in the world. He didn't have to work.
Blumberg is now free to feed his obsession. He sets out to create America's greatest private book collection.
There were certain books he wanted, and he identified the institutions where they would be housed.
Blumberg hits the road to recon his first target, the Washington State University Library.
He very quickly learns the technique for becoming an invisible man.
He was able to walk around and become one of the group.
Blumberg comes into the library, and he's just an ordinary student. Well, he can sit at a table and read, and he can observe the institution. Security is maintained by motion detection systems, by alarms on doors, unique locking structures, surveillance cameras. He knows the entrances, the exits. He knows how the security system operates.
Liking what he sees, Blumberg now checks into a local motel and plots how he's going to break in.
This is a guy who has infinite patience, manual dexterity that's nothing short of phenomenal.
This was a very clever, competent, professional criminal who had it in him to steal books. He was bound and determined to do it, and he did.
Now he's discovered that A, he's good at it, B, he's got a challenge, and C, he's got a goal. The goal is acquisition, rare books.
Stephen Blumberg now travels throughout North America, stealing thousands of valuable books. But as the books pile up, he realizes he needs a place to store them.
He bought this house in the middle of Iowa, which is essentially the middle of the United States. And he used this house as his locus of operations, where he shelves his books. Stephen was not stealing these books to break them up and to destroy them and to sell them on the black market. He stole them because he loved them.
Then, in 1988, he learns about the multi-million-dollar Cotton Mather collection, stored in Connecticut State University Library's massive 7-floor vault.
The collection had many rarities of interest to him, writings all the way back to the 15th or 16th century.
Blumberg researched this library before he went in at the county clerk's office.
He reviewed the architectural drawings, and that's how I figured how to get in there.
There's intrusion alarms, penetration alarms, motion alarms, infrared alarms. The closer one gets to the collection, the more difficult it is.
He prepares himself as though he were going into battle. He's got his maps, he has his plans, and he knows exactly where things are.
Realizing he can't steal the collection's hundreds of books alone, for the first time, he risks bringing in an accomplice.
Kenny Rhodes is a career criminal. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You could not see two more unlike individuals. You have one who is large and makes no bones about what his nature and his activities are, and then you have a small individual who looks like anything but a master criminal. But there was a bond there. He was one of the few people that Stephen actually confided in.
After teaching Rhodes his M.O., they're ready to strike the Connecticut State University Library. He instructs Rhodes to keep a lookout while he enters through a maintenance store.
No matter what kind of security systems you put in place, Stephen Blumberg was determined to get by.
Knowing the massive 7-floor vault is surrounded by a high-tech security system, he accesses its one weak point, the elevator shaft.
This goes to impeccable criminal logic. Stephen quickly figured out that the only way he was going to get in there to get what he was after would have been to go up this shaft.
He then makes his way up to the 6th floor.
Blumberg is a kind of character that is able to slither into the smallest spaces. He can go from one room to another through the ductwork.
He has a strange kind of obsessive courage, willing to take a risk of being trapped in that galvanized metal ductwork in such a way that you might not be able to free yourself. He understands how rare books are preserved. He knew that there had to be a supply of fresh air that was going in there.
The ductwork leads him to a vent directly above his target. Blumberg is in. He sets to work stealing the books, shelf by shelf.
Blumberg would drop them out, and it would be Ken Rhodes' job to get the stuff and to put it into the truck.
After 10 successful trips, Blumberg makes his escape back through the elevator shaft.
About halfway, the elevator began to come down. He was plastered against one of the walls of that elevator shaft and had a clearance of just a couple of inches. That may have been the closest he ever came to being apprehended in a particularly ugly way. He literally narrowly escaped being crushed to death.
Blumberg has pulled off his most daring burglary yet, making off with over $2 million in rare books. But his entire operation will soon be threatened by the only person he's ever trusted. After a multi-million-dollar burglary from the Connecticut State Library, Stephen Blumberg and his accomplice, Kenny Rhodes, plot their next move. While Rhodes catalogs the stolen books, Blumberg recons the Minnesota University Library. It's there that he receives an unexpected gift.
On the checkout table, he saw the identity card of a professor that had been left. He took it, he snapped it up. The man's name was Matthew McGew. What the card gets him is a ticket inside. It would allow him access to more valuable, more scarce, more important materials.
Using the professor's library card, Blumberg creates a new identity for himself.
He got a Minnesota driver's license out of that, and he also crafted a University of Minnesota ID card, and he had his photograph on it.
And now he was able to go around and to purport himself to be a professor. He would dress up as you might expect a young assistant professor to dress.
Blumberg is now able to target the 1568 first edition Bishop's Bible, housed in Houston's Rice University Library.
Stephen had this technique worked out in advance. He's going to be in a study carrel with these books, concealing him.
Blumberg starts by removing any pages in the book marked with the library's stamp.
He could actually razor that page out if it was a blank page and no one would notice.
He then peels off the book plate.
He would lick the plate until the glue melted, and then he would peel that off.
He had his own book plates that he had made up that he brought with him, and he had a library that he had invented. He called it the Columbian Library.
Then the markings on the outside of the spine of the book, those could be sandpapered off.
Finally, using a homemade stamp, he completes the modification.
If they caught him going out, he said, well, I brought this book in because I'm a professor and I'm doing research. It was pretty slick, actually.
I think that was part of the kick for him, that he was able to con these people into thinking that he was a legitimate scholar.
With his new identity cards giving him access to the books he wants, Blumberg realizes he no longer needs Kenny Rhodes to help him.
His meticulous attention to detail and his success rate make him the single most proficient thief I ever saw in my life.
He was at the top of his game.
But Blumberg's pride soon gets the better of him.
It angered him beyond words to read that a man by the name of James Shin, who had been arrested a few years earlier, was being touted as the most accomplished book thief of the 20th century in the United States, and he felt that Shin couldn't hold a candle to what Stephen was doing. And I think a good deal of that explains why he went to so many different libraries. He was going for the record.
In order to score even more books, Blumberg is again forced to change his MO. He breaks into the University of California and steals the keys to their library. Believing the archives are empty, he enters. But suddenly discovers a surprise waiting for him.
A custodian caught Blumberg in a room that was not open to the public. And he calls down to the circulation desk, and it just so happened that the person at the circulation desk had gotten one of those flyers and said, well, wait a minute, that's the guy that they're looking for. They call the county sheriff, and they come out and they arrest him. They take him down to the jail.
He's fingerprinted and charged with possession of burglary tools and trespassing. All charges are filed under his alias, Matthew McGuey.
Late that night, I get a phone call from the sheriff's department, and I said, okay, hold on to him because I think he's a major thief. And said, well, we already let him go.
Why?
They didn't catch him with anything more significant. He made bonded, he was gone.
But when police run his prints, they come up with an unexpected match. The burglar's real name is Stephen Blumberg. Suspecting the police are onto him, Blumberg decides to lay low.
And that's really when the fear of the Almighty was forced into him. He actually stopped stealing.
But Blumberg's past soon catches up with him when Kenny Rhodes is busted on a drug charge.
If not, you're going to do something.
Rhodes negotiates one of the best get-out-of-jail-free cards of all time. I will give you hard physical evidence that will allow you to enter the dwelling of the person who's been doing these thousands of thefts.
The FBI agrees to drop the charges if Rhodes can deliver solid evidence.
He's provided with a miniaturized camera by the FBI.
And so it was Ken Rhodes who contacted Stephen, wanted to come back into his life.
What do you want?
Gee, kind of at loose ends. Do you mind if I move in? He allowed him to move in. Stephen Blumberg trusted Ken Rhodes. But Rhodes was working off an agenda of his own. And once he moved in, he started documenting, taking pictures. And Rhodes is just playing this guy for a sucker.
But Rhodes is also playing the FBI. When he exposes Blumberg's operation, he wants more than a get-out-of-jail-free card.
He wants a little cash. A little cash in this case was $50,000 tax-free.
He saw the potential for a major payday.
Knowing they now have enough evidence to arrest Blumberg, the FBI agrees to the deal. But when they descend on his house, Blumberg isn't there.
Some 30 FBI agents walked in the door and saw what was inside. There was simply no question what the final chapter of this was going to be.
Bookcases from floor to the ceiling, loaded with books removed from libraries.
He had something on the order of 23,000 rare and valuable books, all of them stolen from more than 300 libraries throughout the United States. When Stephen got back to the house, they were waiting for him.
Blumberg, freeze! Your hands above your head! Freeze! Your hands on the railing!
He wasn't arrested because of any misstep that he had made during his years of theft.
To understand these rights as they have been
He was discovered because he was snitched out by Kenny Rhodes.
Go.
At trial, Stephen Blumberg is convicted of multiple counts of transporting stolen property and is sentenced to 6 years.
His life of crime and his plundering of America's cultural heritage was brought to a screeching halt.
Blumberg was driven by the concept that it was his right and responsibility to preserve, for historical purposes, these materials.
I never saw a better criminal. Never saw anybody who even came close to him. There are lots of people in the world who would like to do something on the scale of what Stephen did. The difference is most of them don't have the intelligence or the resources to do that. All of those things came together to create this particular mastermind.
He was a master thief whose mission in life was to steal books. And he was the most accomplished book thief of the 20th century.
I know.